Well, good evening and welcome to our live stream on this Saturday evening, November 8th. And so glad that you've connected with us. Of course, we're continuing on in our fall series, which is entitled What Matters Most in Life. And as I have mentioned previously, worldly people typically come to the conclusion that the earthly things that they are pursuing are both fleeting and fading. Therefore, many of them are searching and seeking for that which has substance and carries a great deal of significance to their lives. Studying Scripture, which is filled with the answers the world desires and is longing for, we've found the five facets of life thus far that matter most to humanity. Those are light, both God's natural and spiritual light, love, which God freely and readily extends, listening for and to God, learning of God by God's example, exhortations and edicts, and then last weekend, laughter stemming from a heart filled with joy. And now tonight, we look at another, namely that of logic. The word logic comes from the Greek word logos, pertaining to the reasoning faculty, reasonable, rational. The word only occurs twice in the New Testament, once by Paul when he wrote to the church in Rome, Romans 12:1, saying, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable. And so there is the logos, reasonable service. And then Peter also uses it once, 1 Peter 2:2, when he says, like newborn babes who long for the pure milk of the word. And so again, this word that indicates that it is reasonable, it is in fact rational, that a baby would seek out nourishment. And so we as spiritual babies would seek out the pure milk of the word. Hence, specifically and conceptually, God has uniquely provided each human being with both the ability, and we will add to that the responsibility to think logically. Now, I know it may not seem like that is the case, but it is. Humanity is to think rationally and then speak or act reasonably. Well, let's get over here to where we need to go. Sorry about that. Some refer to this as spiritual intelligence. I'm not sure I have quite comprehended that term, but just wanted to make mention of that. So how logical do you feel like you are? Well, we're going to put it to a test real quickly with this logic quiz. And you will read this. There are four children who are attending summer camp where they will cook, kayak, rock climb, and zip line. And each child of these four children, four activities, each has a different favorite activity. Now, to help you to determine that, who's cooking, who's kayaking, who's rock climbing, and who's doing the zip line, you would fan through these four clues. And this is a simple logical test, or a test for your to gauge your ability to exercise logic. And I will say, because my background has lent itself to be a logical person, that this is what I said, fairly simple. But what you're looking for is start with what you know, what's the simplest to figure out, and then keep working along in this. And so you have Abigail, a clue for what she's doing, Oliver, Rosa, and then of course Blake, the four activities. So as you're looking at that, Let me move a little bit further ahead and say to you, let's see, logic for life depends on three elements: sound reasoning, sensible conclusions, and spiritual wisdom. So if we would go back to this little test that we gave you, the clues were there, these four. Hopefully, if you didn't get it, you have the ability to go back, pause, and try it again. But the answers are: Abigail likes to zip line, Oliver likes to kayak, Rosa likes to rock climb, and Blake likes to cook. And so again, logic for life depends on three elements: sound reasoning. Those obviously we're in a season now where the political pundits and polls show how opinionated they really are. Sensible conclusions, as one person said, common sense isn't all that common. And spiritual wisdom. Now, in the book of Job chapter 12, that's where we learn that God is the sole source, the only source for wisdom. And so when we're looking at these three things, what we find is that those things collectively mesh together, provide logic for life. And Paul writes about those in Romans 11, 33. And so if you would like, you can open up your favorite Bible version, or if you have a Bible app, you can turn there, Romans chapter 11, verse 33. Now, there was a article by an unknown source that talked about how to stay safe. It's just somewhat of a follow-up to how well we function, how logically we are functioning in the world. And in this article, again by an unknown source, they say, in order to stay safe, you need to avoid riding in automobiles because they are responsible for 20% of all fatal accidents. They went on, number two, do not stay home because 17% of all accidents occur in the home. And then thirdly, avoid walking on streets or sidewalks because 14% of all accidents occur to pedestrians. And then they came to this number four, avoid traveling by air, rail, or water because 16% of all accidents involve these forms of transportation. And then they concluded, so this is the logic flow, they concluded that of the remaining 33% of deaths, 32% occur in hospitals, and so above all, avoid hospitals. Now, they write this, you will be pleased to learn that only 0.001% of all deaths occur in the worship services in church. And these are usually related to previous physical disorders. Therefore, logic tells us that the safest place for you to be at any given point in time is church. Oh, man. Bible study is also a pretty safe place because that percentage of deaths that happen during Bible study is even less than the 0.001%. Well, if you turn to what Paul writes in Romans 11, verse 33, you see that it begins with the word "oh." It's an exclamation. Oh, like oh. And so what we find is Paul is writing, and like many of his letters to the churches, it divides between the theology, the theological topics, and then the practical side of living out your faith. And so here in Romans, when we get down toward the end of chapter 11, he's winding up his theological discourse and about to go into the practical side of how to live out our faith. And so he says, the depth, the extent of the riches. And what he is talking about here is something of value. And so what is of value? What is what is so the depth of the riches? He says both of the wisdom and knowledge of God, and those are connected together with this word. We oftentimes have shared this with you, the Greek word kei, K-A-I, but kei, which is connective. And so his wisdom, God's knowledge are valuable commodities. And so, the richness, the depth of these things. Well, how rich are they, and how what's the extent of them? And so he goes on after he makes this exclamation. He goes on in this verse by saying how, or in the matter of wisdom and knowledge, they are unsearchable. You cannot. I think it's a New American Standard translates here the unfathomable. It's far beyond our ability to really understand and comprehend how unsearchable, how unfathomable are his decisions, the things that God decides. And I would think that most of us would agree that we simply don't think like God thinks. But he says how unsearchable are his decisions. And so another word, again, the use of the word kehi, it's connected. His ways past finding out, or his means or his mode of working in our world are untraceable. They are so far ahead of us, so far laid out that we can't connect the dots, but God can. So, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. That verse written by Paul is summed up in Isaiah 55:9, which says, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So if logic matters so much to mankind, and God makes that possible through the process of thinking, trusting, and testing God, what is the spiritual logic mankind can derive for themselves? Well, let me give those to you. If you have your sermon guide, you can follow along, fill in the blanks. But the logic I derive from God it's an intimate relationship. It's realized through an intimate relationship with God, which is attainable. Now, what I marvel about is the fact that the God who is the creator of all things, the God who reigns, the God who is in charge, the God who resides in heaven, is still willing to connect with me. And if he's willing to connect with me, he's willing, in fact, he's seeking to connect with you. Just as he is connected with me, he is desirous of connecting with you. And so spiritual logic that is rational and reasonable is derived from God, centers on the realization that we can have a connection with God. It's attainable. God, neither the world nor your sin will prevent God from loving you and graciously extending himself to you. Now, why would he do such a thing? Well, it's because he wants to have a relationship with you, and since you can't earn it, he's offering it to you. So our logic, as we consider things, the reasonable and rational, as we consider things in life, what we need to, when we are trying to process through those, what we need to always remember is that our relationship with God, a personal relationship with God, is attainable. He's not so far off. He's not aloof that we can't connect with him. In fact, we find in the New Testament where it says we have a high priest who understands exactly what we face on a daily basis. because he, in the same sense, faced them himself, but yet was without sin. Second of all, the spiritual logic derived from God centers on a realization that all things are possible. And here's where we find people kind of mentally, logically getting off track. People will pout, they'll quit, they'll crab, they'll fight, they even retreat because they don't get their way or their say in life. The problem isn't with God, it is with people, because with God we know logically we have this truth that all things are possible with God. There is no limit to what he can do. So doesn't it make sense to have faith in him? So these parameters or these truths that we that help to build our ability to have a logical processing is, first of all, that a relationship with God is attainable. Secondly, all things are possible. Thirdly, some things are profitable. Not all things, but some things are profitable. Paul wrote to the church in Corinth and says exactly that all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial, or as it says in the New American Standard, not all things edify. So there are things that people will think are correct or right, when in reality they may not be. From their perspective, they might be, but as we engage in decision making, our logic needs to also incorporate this truth that some things are profitable and some things are not. Not everything is appropriate and not everything is appreciated. Logic helps us to survey the situations and determine what should be done, shared, or communicated. Another part of this logic process is that God is always reliable. He will not fail or forsake anyone. So we simply say you can count on God. He is trustworthy to be present, and he is reliable because he's consistent. He is the same today as he was yesterday and will be tomorrow. The last part of this help in doing a rational and reasonable decision making using logic is that God's plans or plan is acceptable. God created each of us. He has a purpose in mind for our lives. And in regards to his intentions for any one of us, he will equip us with ability, personality, and then opportunity. The psalmist says the Lord's plans stand firm forever. His intentions can never be shaken. Now, certainly there are moments when you detour or defy or even delay from following God. You might think you're justified in your refusal. You might conclude that it's too late for you, too much water under the bridge. You might decide God's asking too much. This thought process, the decision making in their life, without this sound reasoning, without this spiritual wisdom, they simply do not have the sense. They are unable to draw sensible conclusions. So how do you begin to integrate logic into your daily life? Well, I mentioned at the beginning, you probably didn't catch it. I didn't have it in your notes, in your sermon guide. So this is kind of an added thing for you. But how do you integrate logic into your daily life? Well, first of all, by thinking on the things of God. Paul wrote in Philippians 4:8, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, think or dwell on these things. And our mind oftentimes doesn't focus on the things of God, but rather the things of the world. And that's our danger, because logic isn't based or isn't founded in the principles and the helps of the world. Our wisdom, or excuse me, our logic is founded on God's wisdom, and He's the only source. So if we're going to integrate that into our daily lives, then we need to begin by thinking of the things of God, not the things of the world. Secondly, not only do we need to think about the things of the kingdom, the things of God versus the things of the world, but we need to be about trusting God, not trusting ourselves, not trusting the advice of others. It isn't to say that we walk around 100% skeptical, but it does mean that we as individuals, as followers of Christ, need to learn to trust and keep trusting in God. Proverbs says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and don't depend. Other versions have, don't lean on your own understanding. Why? Why not lean on our understanding? Because it's very limited. What we understand is what we've experienced or what we've been taught. So either education or experience gives us understanding, but it's very finite. When we lean upon God and His wisdom, it is eternal, it is broad, it is perfect, it is pure. And so not only do we need to incorporate, in order to integrate logic into our daily lives, not only do we need to focus on thinking of the things of God, but we need to trust in God and God alone. And then lastly, maybe a little bit interesting here, but we integrate logic into our lives through testing. And in Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, God says, bring the full tithes into the storehouse. Now, I know probably I heard it pause. He's talking about money. That's not the case. The principle that God gives to the prophet Malachi is this: bring the full tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test. In other words, look, just try this. See if I'm not telling you the truth. So not only is it thinking of the things of God, not only is it trusting in God, but it's putting God to the test. Not God to the test, does God exist? Does God love me? But are the principles of God really that much better? I will save you a lot of time. You're going to go find out yourself. But the answer is yes. God's principles are far greater than any decision or any idea that a man, some human being has come up with. Now, if you take these three things and you start thinking, dwelling, thinking about the things of God, if you start trusting in God for all things and in all times, and then you are even willing to put God's promises and His principles to the test, then you're going to find that you have integrated logic into your daily life. And you and I, we all need, as followers of Christ, God's logic in order to help us determine where God is leading and in those areas where God isn't leading. And so I hope that this is somewhat of a help to you as you begin to integrate them and implement logic into your life, rather than being moved by emotions. It's not a calculation, but it's just saying this may not make sense. It doesn't align with what I know about God, what I've learned about God, what God's asking me to do. And so it'll help you in determining where and what and who you should be serving and working with. Well, I appreciate you connecting with us tonight. Look forward to being back with you next weekend. Until then, hope you get those logic puzzles right and quick. And I'll have some more for you next Saturday evening.